Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. We got our final series of the day between Wildcard Red, the 7th seed, going into Proving Grounds, and 100 Thieves next, the 10th seed, going into this tournament. Wildcard Red. We're not going to dance around it, Josh. This is not only the expected favorite of this match, but also one of the dark horses and potentially tournament favorites of the entire Proving Grounds. This is by far the strongest team coming out of semi-pro. They hit the Grand Slam, winning every single Tier 2 event during the summer in Challengers Uprising, Risen, and the EGL Summer Showdown. This is by far the best team from semi-pro and one of the teams to beat in this tournament.
We also have to remind people that even when NoOrg won last split during spring, they didn't win a Grand Slam, right? They didn't have anywhere near the local dominance that Wildcard Red has, and this is a roster that, you know, the seeds would have you believe that this is going to be relatively close, but buckle in, right? Because not only is Wildcard Red that good, but we also have to pay attention to the fact that 100 Thieves Next are bringing in 2 substitutes for their own team, right? We just saw Gamsu and Chad, who were the 100 Thieves Next players, are now playing for the Academy roster, and instead they have to bring in Dinka and Panda in order to try and actually do well in this tournament.
Now, to give a little insight onto who Panda and Dinka are, let's start with the top lane, Dinka. Dinka has played on Maryville University Black during the spring, and then he played as a substitute for Wildcard Black, their secondary roster, during the summer for a qualifier match during Challengers Uprising.
Oh, we're in.
And we're going straight to the draft. All right. Well, just to kind of wrap things up, Dinka has kind of emerged as one of the next best top laner talents that is kind of, you know, seen within the amateur scene, and it's a scene that is dominated by a lot of strong top laners that have already had some type of experience, whether it's from LCS or Academy. So Dinka, you know, getting a lot of respect. That's cool. Still, this is a new player within the 100 Thieves Next roster. Already Wildcard Red was favored against these guys, even with Chad and Gamsu on the roster. Introducing new players, I don't suspect that Wildcard Red should be dropping this series or any games, let alone the series.
Yeah, and you know, we also have to talk a little bit about Panda, right? Panda also competed a little bit in this year's Summer Proving Ground circuit, right? He played with the team OQ, and while they didn't do particularly well with that team, he was still kind of the standout player in a lot of ways for that roster. And because of that, you know, it makes a lot of sense that Dinka and Panda are coming in to fill the shoes of Gamsu and Chad, but they just have such a tall task ahead of them going up against Brandini and Winston, some of the best performers throughout the regular season for amateur.
Yeah, Winston has kind of cemented himself as the best performing jungler throughout the entire summer split of semi-pro within the Proving Ground scene. And now Winston is ready to take that dominance against all the Academy teams. The fact that they have to play against 100 Thieves Next, I mean, this is not going to even be on Wildcard's radar. They're looking to call this a day and just try to move on. But for 100 Thieves Next, I think the thing that they have to look forward to and really think about is how well they can demonstrate their ability to really just play to the best of their ability and at least make Wildcard Red sweat for the series.
And we're already seeing, I do like this adaptation from 100 Thieves Next, as from what we saw from TSM earlier. They will also want to pick the LeBlanc for Young. They know that it's one of his better champions, and unlike TSM, who didn't believe in Ryoma's rise, they believe in Bradley's rise. Bradley is definitely one of the strongest players in the tournament. We look at this guy as somebody who is, you know, if not LCS ready, definitely Academy ready, and there are some people who believe that he could jump directly to the professional league based on how he's been performing so far. But you have to be very careful, right? You have to make sure that you give him a champion that he's going to be able to perform well on. Luckily for Wildcard Red, that's almost every champion. This guy still plays Gwen mid lane.
He's played almost about everything, and his champion pool and his kind of just depth has been so wide. He's been performing extremely well on a lot of the more aggressive fighting champions that get up in your face, but and not to say that he can't perform as well on control mages like the Azir and the Rise as well, already being banned away from him in Game 1 against 100 Thieves next. They are going to go for the Trundle, though, as well as the Ezreal, playing a little bit more back, having some kiting potential.
Yeah, I want to harken back a little bit to, I believe it was Destrux and Rebel Fox yesterday were talking about, I want to say it was Captain Shrimps, when the Singed Mid was picked, and they were saying, you know, what is larger than a Champion Ocean? I think they settled on a Champion Neptune? Which is, I don't know if that's in the same category of things, but it is a very entertaining comparison nonetheless. And now, with the Rise taken off the table, you still want point-and-click crowd control to go up against the LeBlanc, and it looks like the answer for Bradley right now is Twisted Fate, something that he has a fantastic win rate on this split. Of course, it helps. All of these guys are going to have champions that look really good because they are winning over and over and over. Every single one of these guys is going to have a winning record on basically everything they're going to play.
And the curious thing that I'm looking forward to now is, what is Wildcard Red's game plan for the next two picks? Because right now, Lee Sin and Aphelios have been kind of, these two champions doesn't necessarily lock down what kind of composition they were going for, but now with the Twisted Fate, you have global power to roam for some picks. You're now looking forward to trying and snowball a singular or two specific carries on the side of Wildcard Red. Now, you could be focusing a lot of effort towards Arrow on Aphelios, because if Arrow gets ahead, then we've seen Wildcard games where he is single-handedly just destroying kids left and right. But we haven't seen Brandini's lock-in yet, and I believe that it's because we are saving it for the 5th and final pick of the draft phase.
I can't imagine anything else at this point. I expect to see a support picked up right here for Daption, and he plays a lot of these engage supports very effectively, and with the Thresh taken off the table, I kind of feel like a Nautilus is kind of in the cards, with Leona also banned away. They want to be picking up a little bit more long-range engage and long-range lockdown, especially for the slippery members of the LeBlanc and the Ezreal, and it looks like the answer instead of Nautilus is going to be Rakan, who is able to keep up with these very slippery members.
Yeah, so far in both of these series, Josh, the Nautilus priority has severely dropped down before, because it seems like every game it was, all right, you get Leona and you get Nautilus, or you just kind of handshake the trade. But now that Rakan has risen up in priority, so has the Braum as well, and with 100 Thieves next, so far, LeBlanc being the only person that can effectively go forward, but still has some. The rest of this composition is really looking to play back, Josh. They now have the Gangplank on their side, so between the barrels as well as the cannon barrage, you can create a lot of space if you are 100 Thieves next.
I also feel like you're giving a lot of space, though, because you don't necessarily have great ways to start fights on your own. With this Braum coming through, you're very focused on making sure that you are going to be responding to anything that Wildcard Red is going to be trying to do. Now, the good thing about the Gangplank is it does severely limit the mobility of Arrow on this Aphelios, right? He doesn't have the same kind of movement speed that he would normally be able to, and you just like plop the Gangplank ultimate down on top of him, and it makes it very difficult for them to play. That said, Wildcard Red are also going to be playing in a situation where they can still be very aggressive. The Gangplank lost a lot in terms of its ability to bully out some of these early game plays, and with Brandini going with the Lucian, a traditional counter pick going up against the Gangplank, Dinka is really going to have to showcase that he still knows how to play this champion after his Q got changed to a ranged auto attack and the graphs is nowhere near as impactful.
You know, funny enough, Josh, around not necessarily the same time this last year, but in July, for the 100 Thieves next roster, Tenacity was playing on the squad, and he had locked in Gangplank, and or actually, wait, let me get this right. What was that matchup between Maryville University and 100 Thieves next? Niles was playing Gangplank, and then Tenacity locked in Lucian. So okay, things are not aligning as much as
you know.
Okay. Oh well, screw the story time. The point
Sorry,
is,
that doesn't fit
Lucian.
my narrative.
Yeah. It didn't fit my narrative, so I have to kind of retcon it a little bit. But for Lucian, typically, as you said, has a really good time into the Gangplank. But we have seen players who are masters at Gangplank actually turn around the level 1, because Trial by Fire, true damage burn, if you get into the melee range as well of the Lucian, and the Lucian is not playing respectfully, that is a matchup that Gangplank can actually still potentially win. I'm curious to see, though, how Dink is able to play, because this is not only his stage debut with 100 Thieves Next, but it's also his stage debut within Proving Grounds as well.
I have already said they are facing a mountain right now going up against Wildcard Red. If Wildcard Red don't take up this game relatively cleanly, I will be very surprised. I feel like they have a lot of tools to do it, but it's also a very difficult composition to execute, right? You only have the Rakan as this easy engage tool. You have a lot of ranged characters, and they're all pretty vulnerable to getting jumped on by LeBlanc. So I feel like this is a composition and a draft coming out from Wildcard where they're just like, yeah, we're better. We know we're better, and we're going to show it by playing a composition that isn't quite as straightforward, and we're still going to dominate anyway. And 100 Thieves Next, you know, if they can even give us a couple of close games up against Wildcard Red, it's still going to be significantly outperforming our expectations for how this roster is going to do.
Yeah, if you're 100 Thieves Next, as we said before, you're looking to make Wildcard Red sweat for this. That is your goal, realistic goal at this point. You know, and it seems a little defeatist just to say, oh yeah, Wildcard Red should win this series, but I mean, we'd be lying if we would try to say, oh yeah, you know, there's a, you know, 100 Thieves Next could take some games off of there. If you look at the track record, I mean, Wildcard Red is hyped up to be the best semi-pro team that we have in the league. They are going to be a tournament favorite. They are looking to knock out even some of the top academy teams, catching up with ADFX, their coach for Wildcard Red. You know, some of the academy teams that, you know, we thought that would be on their radar aren't even on their radar. They're more so concerned with FlyQuest Academy and Evil Jesus' Academy versus ones like Team Liquid, who just won the Summer Split playoffs for Academy.
Welcome to Summoner's Rift.
See what they can do. It is going to be a very aggressive start coming out, right? I do really like the unsealed spellbook that Bradley is opting for, right? It is pretty standard coming out for Twisted Fate a lot of the time these days, but it is going to allow you to have access to these defensive summoner spells after the 6-minute mark. So one, you're not going to be as likely to die going up against the LeBlanc, but two, you're also going to be able to switch over to something like Ignite so that you can actually turn things on its head whenever Winston comes through.
Interesting level 1 from 100 Thieves Next already coming out as Bradley showing us Gangnam Style moves on the Twisted Fate. It seems pretty fitting too with the the cowboy skin as well.
Yup. One of my favorite skins, honestly, for Twisted Fate. I'm just very entertained by his power walk that he got ever since it's been like 2 seasons now where he just like struts about instead of having that like slow running animation. But more specifically, as we start looking at the rest of this roster and the rest of this game, Instinct was previously hovering the teleport on the Ezreal, which is, you know, it's fairly standard, right? Something that Ezreals have done for a long time, but now he's opting to go for the heal instead, making sure that they have a little bit more laning power to try and make sure that Arrow and Daption don't run them over.
I have to say that between Ashe and Ezreal, back when Instinct was still a Cillian over on the Mirage Esports roster of 2020, this is one of his comfort champions, one of his most played, as on the Mirage Esports roster, it was a team that typically played towards the top side of the map, and so Instinct needed to be on a champion that could play with minimal attention and be super self-sufficient. Or someone returning back to a little bit of roots and comfort. You know, this is definitely one way to do it if you are 100 Thieves Next, as talking to Ryoma off of the interview just for 100 Thieves Academy. Sometimes it's best to just put some of your players on their most comfortable champions rather than try to force them on something just because the meta dictates it is the best champion.
Always got to pay attention to what people are actually going to be willing to play, and as we get started, we are not noticing anything particularly exciting from either jungle path, right? Lee Sin looking to full clear, Trundle skipping the Krugs, as we often see, but I also have to note that there are some players, right, like Armeo will clear out the full bottom side and then go for a gank top lane as a very aggressive start, and sometimes he'll even give up the blue buff because he's Trundle. It doesn't mean all that much, but we are still seeing kind of some small advantages getting built up for the members of 100 Thieves Next, and Winston already here. We're getting a fight.
And Bradley had already expended a card, though, and a red one's just trying to clear out the wave. Winston and Bradley just trying to gain priority as soon as possible. But Winston's going to face check right into Panda, gets a chomp down, gets some burst damage onto Winston, the jungler for Wildcard, and Bradley has to flash backwards. Oh my god, it's first blood for 100 Thieves Next, and now Panda and Young are running Winston out of the jungle, forcing the flash as well.
very, very like kind of greedy pathing coming through. You had to expect that Panda was going to be there, but the teleport coming through from Bradley means we're looking at a second fight.
Brandini trying to kite this one out. Panda doesn't have flash anymore. Brandini trying to flash away, but Young is able to find another one before biting the dust eventually, as Dinka is not able to necessarily join the fight this early on as Gangplank. Winston, despite being in a very scary and difficult spot, Wildcard still are able to secure the crab, and Winston is now up 2 kills.
Yeah, as we see this fight come through, I mean, the biggest thing is you kind of have to expect Trindle to be somewhere around here, right? And Winston pathing towards the crab walks directly into the brush, which gives you a very easy opportunity for Panda to jump on them. And Bradley, I mean, he's still playing the Twisted Fate. He's got the W, and it's on a very long cooldown, so he only gets the 1 stun. And the teleport does mean that they're able to fight for the crab once again, but I also think it's not completely out of, out of left field to say there might have been another fight around the other crab while this does go on, because Young also teleports directly back into mid lane.
Doesn't seem like there was commotion for it, and based on the mini-map, Winston was able to secure both of the Scuttle Crabs for Wildcard. Gold lead is very minimal, less than 500 for Wildcard at the moment, but Winston being ahead at the moment gives him the Iron Spike Whip, which is going to increase Lee Sin's ability to clear out camps in a rapid manner, and being able to continue affecting the map.
We're also seeing Daption coming up to the top side relatively early. It's kind of a difficult dive with just Daption, but if you bring Winston over as well, suddenly the top lane dive becomes a very real threat, and that's why we see Wise coming up here, but he's the one who jumped on.
He's trying to clear out some vision control, but because Daption and Winston are already in position, they get a bunch of damage down into Gwyce. But Daption taking a lot of damage though, and Young has the first response over to Winston. He tries to smite the Gromp to get some health HP back, looking for one more Sonic Wave, but it's not going to find it. The shutdown gold goes over to Young. Now this LeBlanc has double buffs, is looking to chase out Brandini in the river. Bradley's starting to rotate over as well. It's going to make sure that Brandini gets out alive, but a lot of back and forth that we honestly weren't expecting from 100 Thieves Next.
It feels like Wildcard Red are so confident in their ability to play that they are taking fights that are, a little bit more risky. They just jumped over the wall, kind of having a great idea that Gwyce was there, but also that Trundle was likely nearby, and they just opted into the fight anyway. That is a very difficult fight, and now they're going bottom lane. Instinct has to get out.
Yeah, but Cannon Barrage is being popped, so Arrow and Bradley are going to have to juggle the turret aggro, but they do so beautifully, and the dive is so clean. Arrow and Bradley are going to be able to trade one back onto Instinct. He still had Flash, but it looked like, from his perspective, there's no chance of being able to get out. Might as well just save that extra summoner spell.
I really like the play coming through from Wildcard in this last spot, but I also am a little bit worried that if they continue going for like these very high volatility early games against champions that are very easy to execute like the Braum and Trundle, it could leave them in a very rough spot later on. So they're moving into the 7-minute mark with a very, very small gold lead, and it's mostly on the fact that Winston is notably ahead of Panda, but they also have to be very careful how they want to play this upcoming sequence, because Twisted Fate is way weaker than LeBlanc all of a sudden. This is a matchup that is typically fairly even all on its own, and Twisted Fate wants to try and avoid playing through the next couple of minutes by going out into the side lanes, but he's going to have a lot more difficulty doing that because of how strong Young is. Young can just try and kill him.
Yeah, Young picked up 3 kills within the past couple of minutes, which is not the greatest thing if you are a Wildcard fan, because dealing with a scary LeBlanc does put a little bit of a rudder in your plans to try and accelerate through the early mid-game, which is basically where we expect Wildcard to come online, because you want Bradley to start splitting in the side lanes. You want to see him try and accelerate the top side of the map, but Bradley's going to get caught out. Young taking a lot of damage, but Winston is able to put a couple auto attacks right back, but can he get the kick down? Finds one back onto Young through the Dragon's Rage, flashing away, but Panda has a flash of his own to answer back and picks up a double.
But you see what I mean? Like, Wildcard are just taking fights that are not easy fights for them to go for, right? Like, Winston didn't have to jump in there. You could have just accepted that Bradley was going to die, but he ends up getting another kill. He gets the shutdown onto Young, but he also dies on his own, and so it's meaning that 100 Thieves Next are actually keeping this game very, very competitive, and I feel like it's because Wildcard are so confident in their ability to play later on in the game that they're putting themselves in awkward situations. And I feel like if they continue to do that, we might actually have a closer series on our hands than either of us initially intended.
Brandini opens up with the calling, gets some decent damage down onto Dinka. Just to give some context as well for Wildcard's overall competitive record throughout the summer split. If I'm not mistaken, Wildcard have not lost a single series. They have dropped some games, dropped one against 100 Thieves next during the EGL Summer Showdown semifinals, but Wildcard still have an unbeaten record in terms of overall series score. Now, this is still game one, Josh. It doesn't necessarily mean that this is kind of like doomsday angle for Wildcard, as a lot of times whenever they have dropped games in the past, they are able to quickly adapt going into the next game of the series. So I think we're actually starting to learn a lot about what Wildcard are going to have to work on, for the rest of the game and for the rest of the series, whereas 100 Thieves next, it is kind of refreshing to see that they're not going to be a team that is just going to be walked all over by Wildcard.
I think they still have a lot of play even in this game too, Mark, right? Like, this game isn't even over. We still have a lot of play. There's still a lot of opportunities for Bradley and Winston to find a lot of plays in the side lanes. The big question is going to be, like, are they going to be doing so with a gold lead, or are they going to be doing so with a deficit? And currently, they still have a small gold lead, partly because of how dominant Brandini has been over Dinka. He's already over 30 CS in advantage. And even Bradley, who's died a couple of times now, and Young has gotten a couple of those kills, Bradley is still also leading in CS.
Now Wildcard is going to try to pick this fight, and they easily do away with Panda. Cannon Barrage comes out, but Dinka is not able to get any further damage or follow up with some barrel combos, and Wildcard are going to be in a much easier position to take down this Rift Herald for them successfully. Winston's going to be picking this one up. Wildcard not even having to burn Bradley's Destiny, as the fight came to them, and they do away with the oppressions incredibly easily.
I feel like this is also a much more standard kind of play. Is Bradley just going to use that to... Yep, he's just going to use that to go bottom. They have the Rift Herald crashing up here in the top lane as well, so they should be able to get this first brick at the same time. So suddenly, Wildcard Red, we were looking at the very early game as kind of being a little bit shaky, but they have suddenly exploded the game in their favor over the past, 2 minutes, suddenly going from a almost dead even to having a 3,000 gold lead, and they still haven't even gone for the Dragons. They're playing the much more common style at the higher academy and the LCS level, where you get the Rift Herald, get the gold lead, and then you transfer that power into going for all of these Dragons.
Yeah, you're able to accelerate your mythic item completion timers, as at this moment now, thanks to the turret crashing, Gale Force, Gore Drinker, and Everfrost all being picked up by the top 3 members for Wildcard, whereas everyone else in the game hasn't had that chance to complete their mythic. And now they're going to look for a fight. Quickness, grand entrance right onto Panda. Winston jumps in, trying to explode this Trundle, but he still manages to secure the dragon before falling. It's going to be a double for Brandini, picking up towards the Lucian. It's going to explode the gold lead even further in his favor, as now the gold climbs to 3,000 in advantage for Wildcard Red.
And even with this first dragon going over to 100 Thieves, right, they're happy to pick it up, right? You always want the dragons, and the Mountain Dragon as an individual is by far the most valuable single Drake you could pick up. But it's also coming at a spot where it's a little bit late. That's the first dragon at 10 minutes. You're not very likely to get another 15 minutes where you are still going to be stronger. And so, yes, you pick it up. You stop Wildcard from having their opportunity to try and snowball the game off of dragons. But it is still more gold going over into Wildcard's favor. They are going to be very happy to fight to a Dragon 2, Dragon 3, and every dragon beyond that.
Wildcard Red with their advantage now. This is more what we were expecting, as Wildcard, they don't manage to secure the dragon, but picking up and funneling more gold into this Lucian for Brandini. Start looking to see how well they're going to be able to play around Bradley's Destiny timers, being able to give more of an advantage to Brandini or Arrow, both of these marksmen that are honestly, doing well by themselves in the side lanes at the moment. You can pick kind of an angle or an option of whether you want to give more kills and spoon feed it over into the Lucian if you want to spoon feed the Aphelios. As Dinka tried to flash forward, trying to capitalize on the fact that Brandini took one too many turret shots, but Winston coming over the wall, Dragon Trade into the Sonic Wave, and the Resonating Strike is just too easy for Winston to handle. And Brandini is now going to get more chip damage, even potentially take down this tier 2 turret.
Tier 2 turrets are worth a whole lot more these days as well, right? It's been a while since this change has happened, but it's worth 550 local gold to the person who actually picked it up, and then 50 to everyone on the team. So Brandini, even though he's not the one who got that last kill, he's still going to be getting 2 kills to himself off of taking this turret. And this is a turret that we were not really expecting Wildcard Red to necessarily come back to later on. The fact that they're getting it now just gives them a big boost to their economy that would have likely otherwise been missing for at least 10-15 minutes more.
That turret take down, Brandini picks up his second tier boots. Gonna go for Ionian, just wants to basically increase the uptime on his cooldowns. As Panda is waiting for another cheese, trying to look for the face check brush from Daption. Gets a lot of damage being chunked out of his HP bar, but Panda does have to eat the Moonlight Visual from Arrow. Winston was there just to make sure that things didn't get too out of control for Wildcard Red. This turret is looking ready to fall if Wildcard Red can collapse the rest of the members here. Brandini is ready to make his appearance as well. Bradley having made his way over through the mid lane as well, but an answer back from 100 Thieves next. Throwing out the Glacial Fissure, trying to slow down the opposition, and the approach from Wildcard Red does force their hand, but Bradley says, okay, I'm going to try to cut off the escape route now. Gold card at the ready. Who do they pick? Going to lock in the gold card right down onto Gweiss, and the rest of the members of Wildcard Red are easily able to follow up on the engage. They lose out Brandini, but they take down 2.
Wow, that was a crazy fight. Again, Wildcard Red are so confident in their ability to outplay these situations. They go for undermanned fights, right? They weren't playing with their full strength. They were still picking up the turret on the other side of the fight, and it just doesn't matter. They're going to be picking up another structure. This almost never happens. They're picking up both the bottom lane inner and the top lane inner turret before the mid lane outer goes down. So this is a lot of gold suddenly picked up for Wildcard Red, and yes, it's getting traded back by Dinka on the top side of the map, but they would have much preferred to have an opportunity to even stop a lot of these fights. So notice where everybody goes during this last fight. Like, Arrow is going to actually still be pushing the wave while the rest of Wildcard just goes in for this 4v4, and they end up picking up the turret in the middle of it. Brandini dies, but they're just so confident in their ability to play this a little bit better. They go in, they get a couple of kills, and it results in 2 turrets, like we said, going down, continuing to balloon their gold lead.
Gold advantage about a few minutes ago was only 3,000, but now, as you said, ballooned into 6,000. And this is where Wildcard have to slowly choke out parts of the map. They haven't successfully been able to take down the tier 1 turret in the mid lane, so getting access to the jungle quadrant through the mid lane is not going to be as...
Whoa!
Okay.
I'm really glad that happened right now, Mark, because I was about to start talking about how 100 Thieves aren't out of this game, despite the fact that there's a huge gold deficit looming in their faces, right? Young is very strong in this LeBlanc. Already has the loons completed and is building a second item, has a Dark Seal, and he can blow up a lot of these squishy members. And Bradley coming in around very quickly.
100 Thieves next are able to secure the Ocean Dragon. Can they take the fight? They've already bursted out Winston. Who's to say they can't deal with Arrow, Bradley, and Brandini? It's a lot of damage on the back end, though. Panda eating a full face of that culling, and Young getting split off from the rest of the members of 100 Thieves next means that Bradley can go in to try and pick up the pieces here, but a teleport is coming in from Dinka, looking for a barrel combo of some sort here. Gets one barrel into the bush, but Arrow is keeping them at a distance thanks on the green and white guns right now, but a lot of damage coming out from Dinka. Can it be enough? No! Arrow's sitting below 100 HP, but still doesn't go down. Dabson's able to arrive to the party even after going down at the very beginning of what started this whole mess. And now Wildcard have corralled the rest of the members of 100 Thieves next into the corner, into the alcove, and they wipe them off the map.
They're just so much cleaner at these fights. These compositions are so difficult to play, but Wildcard are still coming out ahead every single time. They have 2 marksmen and a Twisted Fate, right? They just have a lot of ranged characters, but they are so perfectly spacing people out, and 100 Thieves members are coming in at, just slightly desync times. They're not able to lock down any of these members, and Bradley now going to be the one to pick up the mid lane turret. It is now a 9,000 gold lead in favor of Wildcard Red, as they just continue finding fight after fight in positions that are not supposed to be this easy for them to win.
Things looked, honestly, almost decent for 100 Thieves next, right? I mean, taking out Winston, the only member that could potentially disengage or have some durability on them versus the rest of what are essentially just glass cannons in Arrow, Brandini, and Bradley. And then Dinka coming in, you almost think that maybe there's a chance to go for a re-engage, but just look how well, as you already called it out, the spacing from Brandini and Arrow, able to distance themselves out of harm's way from Dinka just in time for Daption to come in. And at this point, they just have to be patient.
Yeah, I mean, just watch how they play, right? Bradley is trying to stay at max range. They're staying so far away from each other so that they can never get hit by AoE abilities. LeBlanc's distortion is never going to hit more than one person, and yes, LeBlanc can kill one of them, but it takes a lot of time for LeBlanc's abilities to come back up, and all of these marksmen can DPS down your entire team in that small period. So Wildcard Red very far ahead at this point, very confident in their play, and even though they're taking awkward situations for these fights, it's ultimately not mattering.
Arrow trying to blow up the minion wave and get some chunk damage down through the Moonlight Vigil. Winston going in for the engage. Daption follows up. 3-man grand entrance is absolutely beautiful from Wildcard Red. They take out 3 from 100 Thieves next. The Baron isn't up on the table for another 5 seconds, but Wildcard might just say, you know what? Let's go for it anyway.
They're just going to be able to pick this up. They are so far ahead. Just a crazy flank. And Daption, kind of an unsung hero so far. He's just been finding every single engage. He is the bulk of this team's crowd control, and he is doing a fantastic job locking down a ton of members all at the same time with the quickness. And Wildcard Red are huge beneficiaries for it, because every single one of these marksmen, every single one of these ranged characters has an AoE ability that they can lay on top of it.
Wildcard Red, just absolute domination. The first 5 minutes of the game, Josh, were
scary.
Yeah, kind of a head scratcher, and maybe it was a sign of life for 100 Thieves next to say, hey, yeah, you can't just roll over us within the early game. We've got some decent champions, and the volatility of how those skirmishes play out, potentially could have bit Wildcard Red in the bud. But now we're looking at a 11,000 gold lead in favor of Wildcard Red. This game is surely in their hands. It's just going to be a matter of time before they make the steps necessary to close out the game from here.
Well, luckily for them, they siege relatively well. They have a bunch of ranged characters that can hit these structures. The one problem that they're going to have is, Bradley, a lot of damage. Yeah, the one problem they're going to have is there's a fair bit of wave clear. Particularly wherever Dinka is, right? He can clear out a lot of these waves. He has the ultimate to be, available wherever he needs to on the map. So Wildcard does continue to need to play this very touch and go. They need to be very aware of the very small windows that they're going to be playing around for all of these team fights. If they can continue to do that, they should continue to win. But it will kind of slow down a little bit on this stuff.
Wildcard just making sure that they're playing off the minion waves right now. The top wave had built up just a little bit ago, so now slowly pushing on its own, whereas Bradley is creating a bigger push through the bottom side of the map. The Wildcard just playing off of the stacks of the minion waves, crashing into the inhibitor turrets before making their move, choking out the vision in this bottom jungle quadrant as well. They still have a dragon that they could always go to, but their priority is getting as much damage down onto these structures as possible.
And notice they also have a wave pushing the top lane at the same time, so they're looking for this, but they got to make sure they pick the right targets. Instead, they're just holding Bradley's gold card to push them off of the turret, and they're going to be able to pick up this inhibitor 22.5 minutes in, and now, oh god, Penny's gone.
Winston wants to go for the flashy insect plays, pops the stopwatch just to buy some time, as they've already eliminated Panda off the rift. The huge minion wave that it will be eviscerated by 100 Thieves next. The inhibitor being taken successfully by Wildcard. So now going to retreat back into the jungle quadrant, be able to take a Cloud Dragon off of the exit point as well for their troubles. And Wildcard are going to reset and do it all over again, Josh.
Now they just have to do it in the top side of the map, right? This Baron is going to expire in a couple of seconds, but in 3 minutes time there will be another one to fight for, and with the inhibitor down for a full 5 minutes, they're still going to have like a full minute window, so about 2 waves of supers that Wildcard Red will have to just create pressure on the bottom side of the map before 100 Thieves can... Did he just killed that over the wall? He didn't even walk through. He's so strong. That's
even
nuts.
Did he even leash it for himself? Oh god, Dinka.
I think so, yeah.
I mean, he's got oranges. He's going to cleanse it, but can you cleanse the Everfrost route? Miller comes out, is able to slow Bradley, just only for a little bit, though, but you've got to worry about Daption and Brandini, who just come cruising through the jungle. Pick off Dinka. Baron isn't up yet for another 2 minutes, but Gangplank down means the wave clear is going to be less powerful for 100 Thieves next to try and push back against the minion waves pouring into the base.
Look at this. They're already ready to just try and come into the mid lane. They don't have a wave just quite yet, but there's supers building up in the bottom lane. Twisted Fate is pushing out the top side of the map. Dinka's still dead for 15 seconds. So there's going to be most of this wave here that Wildcard Red will be able to push underneath the turret. And instead, it looks like they're going to be opting to go top lane, where Bradley has already brought in the wave, and they're going to be crashing multiple waves at about the same time.
Bradley already... with this gold card between Rapid Fire Cannon and Lichbane, not only has the extra range to lock down a potential target, but it's kind of currently boasting a bit of burst damage as well. We normally don't think of Twisted Fate doing burst damage, but when you're this far ahead as the Twisted Fate 3 items to LeBlanc's 2, you can be a decent threat. And now looking at the way that Wildcard are just bouncing back and forth between these two minion waves, Moonlight, Vigil, and Arrow.
Arrow's by himself?
Arrow is just solo killing people almost by himself. Didn't even need the rest of the team. Forcing away Young, and they take down Panda super easily. Wildcard Red are now able to walk into the base, looking to make their last stamps and taking down this middle inhibitor on the exit route as well.
I feel like 100 Thieves probably could have tried to kill Arrow, but he was just so calm. He was like, no, I'm going to outplay you guys. No, I'm better. No, we're good. And then Wildcard was like, oh, you know, we should probably go help him. But look how far behind they are. They're just looking for these windows, and they're not quite finding them. Whereas Wildcard just continuing to balloon every advantage they can. Young trying to find an assassination, but he's not even going to be able to stick to Bradley.
Oh.
Okay, Instinct gets it.
Instinct flashes forward, says, sit down, boy. This is a small victory for the Young AD carry of 100 Thieves next. I think the other thing that we have to note that apart from Dinka and Panda, this roster historically has been a fairly young roster. Instinct, when he was still a Cillian, made his competitive debut with an amateur on Mirage Esports when he was 14 and a half years old. He wasn't even 15 yet when he officially joined the roster, and now I believe he is 16 on this 100 Thieves next roster. He's still one of the bright spots of this roster, but Wildcard, they're so far ahead, they can make plays like this, Josh, and just wiping out 3 members for free. I think Wildcard can push in this last minion wave, take out the last inhibitor, potentially look for the end of the game. If they don't feel confident quite yet, then they always have a Baron to swing back to.
They can do a whole lot of things at this point, and this is, you know, for everybody who was wondering if this is the first time that you're seeing Wildcard Red, you guys should remember this team for the rest of Proving Grounds, right? They are a very, very strong team, and even despite the early game, you know, foibles that they had, they were still able to come around and dominate the early mid game, dominate the rest of the mid game, and they are still up 14,000 gold in 27 minutes. They're going to be picking up their second Baron here at 27 minutes, and there is nothing that 100 Thieves can do about it. Yeah, there's a lot of, you know, upcoming players in 100 Thieves next that we should be paying attention to over the next couple of years, but for now, Wildcard Red is showing them why they were able to win every single Tier 2 tournament and why they didn't even need to play through the Unified Grand Prix, because they are just that strong.
They are the #1 seed from Semi-Pro, which makes them the 7th seed going into the Proving Grounds tournament. And just, you know, Young is able to get one back. He gets
he gets something. Yeah. I mean, I do want to remind people that this is not the 100 Thieves next roster that actually made it to Proving Grounds in the first place, right? Dinka and Panda, again, are substitutes coming in for Gamsu and Chad, who are currently playing with the Academy, 100 Thieves Academy roster. So, you know, the fact that 100 Thieves next are still playing. They still had a competitive early game. I want to give them a lot of props for, right? This is a new team that they're playing with, going up against Wildcard, who is already going to be a very difficult opponent. And I feel like, considering how new rosters tend to play together, where they aren't quite as coordinated, they've done a lot of things that I think would have given them some advantages against a lesser team. Unfortunately, Wildcard is Wildcard.
And Wildcard is currently just destroying 100 Thieves next in their own base. 14,000 gold up. They can just waltz right on in. Bradley is currently pushing in the top side of the map as well. Wildcard don't drop a single member in their onslaught of the base. All 3 inhibitors have been taken. This is a full-on game. Wildcard in this first game only dropped 1 tower. And they take everything away from 100 Thieves next in the opener of this series.
There are still some bright spots for 100 Thieves next, and again, we're going to be continuing to see them in this next game, and then, let's be honest, probably in the lower bracket. There are still some things that we should praise them for. Instinct had a CS lead over Arrow, right? Arrow ended up going deathless, but they were still able to find a couple of really good picks early on in the game. Unfortunately, they clearly are lacking something that Wildcard Red has developed so well over the course of this last season. They've been able to consistently out-team fight, and you can just see, I just am so impressed at how well they're able to draw these concaves, where it's so difficult for even the LeBlanc to operate against all of these squishy members, because she can never hit more than one of them at a time.
A lot of her spells outside of the distortion is single target. But when you have 3 glass cannons all inching their way towards you, but spread out far enough that you can't go for all of them at once, then, you know, panic starts to settle in. I'm like, oh, who am I supposed to kill first? And then you don't even get a chance to, because Wildcard Red, they're just so damn good at being able to identify and communicate how to team fight in those situations. And it's something that, you know, talking to pro players a lot, when you get higher and higher up from the semi-pro and start working your way to the academy level, a lot of the times the conception is that, you know, it's the macro that is more important. But sometimes it's just how you approach a team fight and understanding what your character's supposed to do in certain situations. And a lot of the times when you look back and review a fight, you can just say, oh, if I actually just play the fight this way, this fight is actually winnable. It doesn't necessarily matter so much about the macro gameplay. And I think that's what Wildcard Red just have over a lot of the teams, is they're just really damn good at fighting in these small skirmishes and team fights.
Yeah, it's a conceptual leap that you have to make, and Wildcard Red are consistently doing that, right? There's no question during any of those fights, like, well, do we win this? It's like, if we play it right, yeah. It doesn't necessarily matter if it's a easy fight or not, but we saw them consistently going for fights. They were just here to brawl, and when you're winning them more often than you're not, you're going to be able to build a big gold lead. So we'll see what else Wildcard Red want to play. I still think that there are a couple things, a couple small mistakes they made early on that would have made this game even more dominant, but it's hard to fault them for the results when they're still finding a massive W anyway.
I mean, Wildcard Red, they're the tournament favorites for a reason, right? I mean, or at least one of the tournament favorites, especially from the semi-pro scene, and you know, I'm looking forward to seeing more of their dominance. Obviously, you know, don't want to count on 100 Thieves next from being able to show a little bit more in this next game, but when we return, we'll expect to see more exciting gameplay from both of these teams when we return.